Hello, scrappers, recyclers, and investors interested in companies that are somehow involved in the world of scrapping and recycling. How's everybody doing? It is great to be here. Welcome to Shark Scrapper Live, where every week we talk about a precious metal, an industrial metal, a safety note, a business note, stocks, just, see what's going on in our fascinating industry. It is great to be here. We've got a lot to cover today. So I can't wait to dive in. But holy cow, before we start, man, oh man, did we have some rain here last night. We had a low pressure system come across Florida, and boy, howdy, we had some wind and rain. It's still kind of windy out there right now. And we had some really good rain. So just a really interesting storm to come through the area. I hope everybody's safe. And then up and down the eastern seaboard, probably going to be quite a few travel disruptions. So hope everybody's safe. And if you're out traveling about, I hope that you don't have any interference. Welcome, Andrew Powell from New Zealand. Always great to have you here. HH Recycling, JR Cat, Roger at CU Scrapping, Scrapping Irish as always. Let's see, who else do we have down here? E-Waste Mike. Hey, Mike, great to have you here. HH Recycling, awesome crowd. Great to have everybody here today. So without further ado, let's dive right into our precious metal today. We're talking gold. Let's see. So we're at 2,032.50 an ounce, but you can see that we kind of dropped off a little bit here near the end of the 24-hour period. We were slowly going up, and then we've sort of taking a couple of hits here. What are we looking at for the 3-day? Kind of a similar kind of pattern going here. A little ramp up, then we drop, a little ramp up, then we drop, ramp, drop. So kind of a weird thing going on with gold. Gold's trying to hold on to that high, but we seem to be eroding a little bit, maybe having a little correction here as folks settle down with what's going on. We're up for the week at 0.65%, which, isn't huge. But if you see what happened during the week, early in the week, things dropped off. Then we had a nice ramp up, and now we're dropping off again. So a little correction going on in gold world here. I don't think this is huge. Let's take a look at our 1 month. We are up 1.87% for the month. You see this big dip that we took here, and then we climbed back up, and now we're dipping back down again. As long as gold is staying above $2,000 an ounce, we're doing well. It's going to keep the prices up for our e-waste scrap, our e-scrap, and our components, and that's what we really love to see. Here we have our 3-month. We're up 4%, so that's nice. Year to date, we're up 10%, almost 11%. So that's very nice. And for the year, we are up 12%. And you can see we've had a lot of ups and downs here. We lived through all this, right? So we know what's going on here. But it's nice to see gold up like this. 5-year, boy, it would have been nice to buy gold 5 years ago, wouldn't it? And then, of course, it would have been really nice to have bought gold back here in the mid 1993-ish or 1994-ish, something like that. That would have been sweet. I don't know. Hey, did any of you buy gold back here in the mid 90s? Were you into that world at that point? I know I was not. I was still heads down, being in the Navy, paying attention to Navy stuff, and didn't know a whole lot about investing or stacking or any of those kind of things. So, I was not taking advantage of this low. I'm wondering if any of you all were taking advantage of all of this opportunity in here. By the time I retired from the Navy here in 2008, gold was starting to climb, and I was just beginning to pay attention to what was going on with silver and gold and investing and those kind of things. So gold doing pretty good. I think, what we're going to expect to see here is reasonably steady prices for our scrap products, our electronic scrap, our boards and such as that, we should be good to go. So if you've got stuff and you still have a yard that is open between now and the end of the year, feel free to take it in and get your money. Get your cash flow going. Hey, Daniel, welcome. My yards are mixed, right? I've got one of my yards is going to be shut down for the whole week of Christmas. So Christmas Day, for that whole week, they're going to be shut down, giving their team the entire week off. That's really, I think that's really actually pretty good. Pretty nice for them to do that. Then I've got two other yards that they're going to be closed on Christmas Day, on Monday, and then they're open up business as usual for the rest of the week. So what are your yards doing for the Christmas holiday period? Are they going to be shut down? Are they going to be open? Are they going to have reduced hours? What's going on there? Because, that can be a challenge, right? If you're trying to make your end of year numbers and your yard is shut down from the 25th until the 2nd of January, you're not going to be making your end of year numbers now, are you? So let's see. J.R. Cat is saying that in 1993, he was just trying to keep the lights on. Yeah, I hear you, man. I hear you. HH says he bought some wrong kind of gold there. Wrong kind of gold, man. Let's see. HH is saying his is open all next week and on the 2nd. Okay. All right. Very cool. Very cool. It's always interesting, the business decisions that go on with, shutting down for the holidays and, paying your employees, not paying your employees, those kind of things. Because it's always an interesting challenge, right? If you have full-time employees, if you give them paid time off, they're actually accruing that, it's accrued value for them. And you either have to let them have the time off, or if they leave the company beforehand, then you're paying them their salary. Now, of course, if you have part-time employees or hourly wage earners, they're not getting paid unless they show up and work. So there's a lot of differences and some nuances in what happens to staff during that time. Roger says both of his are closed on the holiday Mondays and open the rest of the week. Okay. All righty. And Scrapping Irish says he was still in school in 93. All right, man. I didn't realize you were, never mind. I'm not going to say anything. Not going to say anything. Hey, Bush Dog, great to have you here. All righty. It's an interesting thing. I wish I knew enough about gold back in 93, 94 to do it, All right. So let's see. HH, by the way, he says he's listening, but he's got to get his scrap shop sorted out. So no worries, man. Keep working. We got it. Electronic Scrappers in the house. Welcome, Electronic Scrapper. Great to have you here. All right, so our next thing would normally be our safety note, but I'm going to hold off on the safety note for just a minute because I want to take another deep dive into something first. And the thing that we're going to dive into first here is plastics. It's time to talk plastics. We haven't talked plastics for a while, so let's go take a look at what's going on with plastics. This is courtesy of the ISRI Weekly Update. So I belong to ISRI, the Institute of Scrap Recycling Industries, and I get a weekly, here's what's going on, and they talk about all kinds of stuff related to scrapping and the economy and stuff like that. It's a really good weekly update. So here we've got the U.S. recycling plastic exports saw a decrease of 10% in October of 23 from the previous month, and in September there was a monthly increase of 13%. Year to date, plastics fell by 6.2%. Dollar value declined 22.6%. And the top 10 countries. Now we're going to take a look at the numbers here for exports. But the top 10 countries receiving U.S. recycled plastics accounted for 90.6% of the exports. So Canada remained the number one country to receive U.S. exported recycled plastics. This is fascinating that Canada is buying so much of our recycled plastics. That's just, to me, that was just really interesting. I'd love to know from my Canadian contacts, all you guys that are up there in Canada, do you know what's going on with the plastics that we're sending up there? Because I find that to be really interesting. Mexico was second, and we're going to look at some real hard numbers here in just a minute. And also of note, Spain and Vietnam started increasing their purchases, and Turkey and Germany dropped. So really kind of interesting with plastics going on there. And then let's see, here's the numbers that I want to look at. So if we look at these numbers, we can see that Canada, where are we at? Year to date, October, 130,000 metric tons, up 3.6%. Mexico was down 12, almost 13%, but they're still our second biggest receiver of our exports. India at 39. And this is kind of interesting, right? You look at Canada, 130,000. That's over twice what the number 2 spot is buying in our recycled plastics. So that means Canada is buying a lot of recycled plastics. I just find, to me, that is amazing that Canada is buying that much of our recycled plastic. And then, we see what the other countries are here. And you notice that China is not on the list anymore. China used to be buying up all of the world's plastics, and then they realized that that was causing them a lot of problems, and so they're causing the Chinese a lot of problems, because what was happening was the Chinese economy was just going so fast that they needed all of the raw materials they could get their hands on. The problem was they were not enforcing any of their environmental or health and safety laws that were quote unquote in place. And so they had a lot of their population that was getting sick from dealing with the plastics in unsafe fashion. And so the Chinese government, said, well, it's actually costing us more because of the environmental and health associated costs associated with this. So the solution was, we're just going to stop bringing in the plastics. Rather than crack down on the companies that weren't handling them properly, they just started banning them. Now, of course, that hasn't been a huge issue because after COVID, the Chinese economy didn't come screaming back the way a lot of people thought it would. So they haven't needed the raw materials, and they're still a big market where the stuff ends up going into places like Singapore and Hong Kong, and then goes into China, through their quote unquote economic developed customer client paths and stuff like that. So just an interesting twist on what's going on with China and with plastics. So let's see. Bruce is saying in here he doesn't know of anybody who's paying for plastics in his area. And Bush Dog is saying that it's funny that because Canada is trying to cut out single-use plastic. I get it. And Homestead 360, too bad we can't sell plastic at the scrapyard. It's tough. I mean, sometimes it is really challenging. Roger saying, if it's not number 1, 2, or 3, there's no profit in it. Now, what Roger is referring to, I'm sure most of you know what that means, but if you look, and I don't know if you're going to be able to see it on this Coca-Cola bottle. Let's see, it is right here. So I don't know if that is going to come through there. I kind of think I got a little bit of a shadow on it. Right there is a triangle, and in that triangle is a number 1. So that number 1 means that this is PET, you know, that's a type of plastic resin, polyethylene terephthalate, and it's what we see most common. It's the most common plastic. It's clear. It's got some rigidity but flexibility, and very common plastic. It's also one that can be recycled without too much effort. The biggest problem with plastics is actually, and there's you know, it's funny, but there's a lot of commonality in recycling plastics to recycling metals. Most of the work, most of the real effort has to be done right up front. And a lot of that is touch labor. You know, just like with metals, you know, those just like us, right? We are that upfront touch labor. We take a metal object, a computer or a washer or a dryer or whatever, we break it down into the constituent metals, and then we sell those to our scrap yards. And our scrap yards may do some more work to further isolate those metals so that when they sell a load to a refinery, it's as clean as can possibly be. Well, the same is true with plastics, right? So what happens with plastics is this lid is a different type of plastic than the bottle, and then it has a paper label. So in order to recycle this bottle, you have to take off the lid and you have to take off the retaining band in order to ensure that you're not polluting the type of resin. Then you have to take off the paper. Now, this one is relatively clean, but you know, sometimes these plastic containers have got nasty in them. You know, food that's been rotting for days or weeks inside of it, or people's cigarette butts if people are still silly enough to smoke. You know, there's no telling what might be in the plastic that has to be washed. And then you have to wash it, sort it, then you're going to shred it, and then you might melt it down and turn it into little pellets. And then the pellets are what are sold to plastic companies that melt them down and extrude them and either turn them into, again, little bottles or whatever. And then the other challenge with plastics is that most plastics, when you melt them down to try to recycle them, you disrupt the purity of the hydrocarbon chains, and that degrades the quality of the recycled material. So depending upon the process that's used, you may not get clean PET out of recycling the bottle, and then it has, that plastic then has to be used for things other than the PET application. So recycling plastics has much of the same challenge up front that recycling metals do, but then you have the additional challenge of when you recycle it, it can become polluted with stuff that can actually change the material characteristics. Not as true with metals, because you can, through the right chemical processes, you can refine gold and silver, copper, aluminum. Yeah, alloys can be a little tricky, but you know, there's ways to let the chemicals do the process and help you separate things. And then sometimes you just go ahead and say, well, you know what? We're not going to bother trying to separate brass into its constituent elements. We're just going to, brass is brass. And we might separate it by yellow brass, red brass. We'll analyze the alloy, and then that's what we're going to turn it into. So a little bit different with, you know, with metal and plastics than in how they get recycled. Let's see. Let's catch up here on a few comments here. Nice chunk that happens where I'm at. They use ground rubber tires. Oh, okay. Yeah. All right. I have seen a number of projects where they've tried to, you know, where tires are trying to be recycled. There's some, of course, some interesting challenges with tires and what you do with tires. There's off the coast of Florida, they're dealing with a real huge challenge because for a while people thought that you could just throw the tires in the ocean and use them to make artificial reefs. Well, they have since discovered that the tires leach toxins, and so all they've done is create these huge dead zones instead of creating any kind of natural reef or habitat. So now they're trying to clean up all these tires that are down in the ocean. So boy, howdy, was that a mess. But there's other places where the tires are broken down to get the carbon black, to get the steel belts and things like that out of the tires. So that's an interesting use for rubber. E-Waste Jill, welcome. Great to have you here. Brizzy Boy, hey, welcome, man. Great to have you here. Haven't seen you for a while, man. But that's because I haven't been coming up on a lot of the other streams. So that's my fault, not yours. Simple Man is in the house. Great to have you here. So carrying on with plastics, we all see the numbers that are on the bottom of the container. And those numbers are important because it helps to identify what that plastic is. Now, we have to be careful. Let's not, we don't want to fall into the trap of thinking that, just because I put that number 2 or that number 3 plastic container in a curbside recycling bin, that it's going to get recycled. That's not always the case. A lot of times, the city or the county or, the government that's responsible for your waste handling, or if they've contracted it out to a waste hauling company firm, they can no longer sell a lot of that plastic to make money. They can't afford to separate it. So it ends up either going to a place where it's burned for energy, or it goes into a landfill. Now, if it's getting burned for energy, the waste to energy conversion plants are at least regulated and monitored by the EPA. They have to have air scrubbers, things like that. So there's a little, it's not as bad as the stuff just ends up in a landfill and is going to be there for 1,000 years. It's not great because it's still contributing to CO2 and, global warming and stuff like that, but at least it's not filling up the landfills. There are still some places where plastics are recycled. There are companies out there that are trying to increase their use of recycled plastics. So, it does get challenging. The plastic that we tend to run into the most is ABS. And I've done some research on ABS because I had a guy that would buy it from me, but he went out of business. So the acrylonitrile butadiene, which it's acrylic and nitrile and mixed together in the presence of butane, something like that. So it creates this 3-chain resin, which is, hard. We know it because that's what is in a lot of the computer shells, right? Good, hard plastic. And it's easily molded, so it can be melted and extruded. And that's why you see so much ABS used, in plastics, in appliances, in vacuum shells, those kind of things. And it can also be chemically resistant and has some good characteristics in a broad range of temperatures. So ABS plastic, we deal with that a lot in our industry, right? In the recycling industry. And it's, it's kind of it can be recycled. So, the ABS plastics can be ground down. They can be turned into other, pellets or sheets and mixed with virgin resin to make ABS plastic. So that can happen. It all comes down to the economics of doing it in the location, that someone happens to be at. So, there's some real challenges to what happens with all of these plastics, and some are more recyclable than others. And there's, a lot of work that's being done in trying to understand this. I read this week when I was researching this. A group at UT Austin has identified they found a bacteria that eats plastic, And from that bacteria, they were able to separate a petase, and they're actually calling it a fast petase because it can break down the plastics in 24 to 48 hours back to constituent elements of, back to oil, basically. So, that's kind of interesting because if they can figure out how to do that on a commercial scale, then we've really got some good promise for recycling plastics. So, a lot of effort is going into figuring out how to recycle plastics. And trust me, I'm not saying that plastics are bad. We could not have the society that we have right now without plastics. I mean, they do everything from make our sunglasses that protect our eyes from projectiles and UV rays, to our drinks, to medical equipment that is resistant, that can protect you from bacteria and viruses, and just make things lighter and safer. So our modern society requires plastic. We just have to get better at what we do with that plastic so that it's not ending up in the eco stream forever. Let's see, what kind of comments did we have coming up on plastics while I was talking? So, Bush Dog says a person needs to make a contraption of plastic and gasoline for our vehicles. Yeah, so that's what I was just talking about, Bush Dog. They look for the bacteria that can consume the plastic. Then they figure out what is inside the bacteria that's allowing them to do that, and then they try to figure out how they can synthetically produce that into what it can be referred to as a petase, right? So for PET, it's the chemical that can break down the PET. For each one of the plastics, it's a little different. There are people that are working on that. So there's some stuff happening. It's going to take some time. E-Waste Joe, you should see how spotless trailers have to be for new tires. Food grade clean. I'm not quite sure I'm following. I think, are you saying that if you're going to transport the trailers, if you're going to transport new tires, the trailers have to be very clean? I think that's where you're going with that. I wonder why they have to be so clean just to transport tires. Interesting. Although it's kind of a funny story. I went to pick up my dad. When I was like 16, 17 years old, I went to pick up my dad at the airport one time. And he was coming back in a small plane, a little puddle jumper, regional kind of flight. And my dad was the only human passenger in the plane. The rest of the seats were taken up with tires. Apparently there was a race going on and they needed the tires for one of the cars. And so, the race company or whatever bought seats in the airplane to put tires in the seats to fly the tires. So it just, my dad said it was one of the worst smelling flights he's been on in a long time. Oh my. All right, let's see. Let's see. Scorpion is saying, Bush Dog, I looked at that. If the EPA finds out, they will bury it. So I'm not quite sure what you mean there, Scorpion Metals. I think you're referring back to Bush Dog's comment about looking for something that can make gasoline. There's a lot of research going on into doing that. And, the EPA, I don't know if they're helping to fund any of that research, but the only concern the EPA is going to have, of course, is, what's being done with the chemicals and the emissions, and is it being done so that it doesn't hurt the environment in the process of trying to break those plastics back down again. So let's see. Bush Dog says he knows Canada is failing in their own plastic recycling. We have huge fines for sending overseas to be burnt, and they've started sending it back to Canada at our own expense. Yeah, which is interesting. Why is Canada then buying so much plastic? So I find that really interesting. Why Canada is buying so much plastic, if the perception among Canadians is that the program is failing. So where's the disconnect in there? Something's not adding up. Daniel's saying that bug, and I'm sure he means the bacteria that's eating the plastic, doesn't want to get loose. Yeah. Well, yeah, I think that right now those bacteria are only under very special conditions that they exist. So yeah, that would, and actually, if I remember correctly, Daniel, I think that they discovered the I don't know if it's the same group from UT Austin. There was another group that they discovered the bacteria when they were looking at the plastics that were floating around in the oceans that were breaking down into the microplastics. And they were looking at what's the process, how is this happening? And that's where they discovered these bacteria. So they're already out there. They're just not very fast acting. So, I guess that's, in one way, that's a good thing, right? Because otherwise the bacteria would consume all of the plastics that we need. Yeah, so it'll be interesting to see how that one works out. Let's see, Roger saying, yeah, call them a necessary evil. We need to work harder with what we do with them. Yeah, we really do. I mean, it's we've got a responsibility, but everybody needs to take responsibility. One thing that that I feel I really feel strongly about this is that, yes, we consumers have to do our part, but we're not the only people. And one of the things that went on about 20 years ago was that the plastic manufacturers went on an advertising campaign to tell everybody to recycle your plastics, recycle your plastics. They led us to believe that all we had to do was recycle our plastics and the problem was solved. But what we didn't know at the time was that there really wasn't a way to recycle the plastics, or they weren't being recycled to the extent that the advertising campaigns were leading us to believe. Well, we're a lot smarter now. You can go on YouTube, you can see probably 100 different videos on the myth of plastic recycling, the stories of plastic recycling. So we as consumers are a lot smarter now. We know that that's not really what's going on a large enough scale to solve the problem. The potential is there. It can be done. We as in all of us need to do our part. So the consumer needs to reduce how much plastic we get and recycle. The plastics industry, the American Chemical Council, the international chemists and things like that need to work on ways to be able to recycle plastic more efficiently, more economically, or use these new chemical processes to turn them back into oil. We all have to do our part in order to manage this on a global scale. So it's definitely need to be worked on. Portland uses plastics to make biofuel and runs their garbage trucks on it. Oh, interesting. All right. I thought that was just oil from leftover oil and cooking oils and stuff like that. I didn't realize they were breaking them down to breaking plastics down as well. So that's really cool. Scorpion Metals is adding on that you can melt the plastic and split it into biofuels. He's heard of places getting shut down, but he's not sure why. Yeah, I don't know. I did not come across any sources for that, so I don't have any definitive information to be able to help you out there, confirm it, deny it, understand it any better. But I'll keep looking and see what I can come up with. Bush Dog's is talking about, yeah, I mean, there's like anything, there's the illegal plastic, there's the illegal aspects of refining, of the recycling industries in everything, right? Plastics, metals, gold, silver, copper, right? So there's always that going on. JR Cat is saying we ought to feed those bacteria some Red Bull. Yeah. Oh man, that's a crack up. And of course, Daniel's saying that's how Godzilla was born. Yeah, I get it, man. I mean, it makes for some great sci-fi, doesn't it? And then E-Waste Jill is saying the people who recycle tires can't get enough of them. Tires have a huge amount of oxygen embedded in them, and coal-fired electric plants love them because it helps them. Oh, okay, very cool. All right, that's good to know. Yeah, and it's funny because I've seen some documentaries on folks that were illegally dumping tires. They would get paid to recover tires, and then they would dump them someplace because they couldn't transport them properly, or weren't planning on doing it in the first place. So yeah, I there's a lot of things that can be done, and there's a lot of people that are just taking advantage of of what is like, and what it's like out there, and they're just thieves taking money and not doing what they're saying they're supposed to do. So it kind of brings us to our safety tip for the day. We all deal with plastics in our recycling businesses, right? And my safety tip here is kind of a mix of things, right? The first part is be careful with plastics, especially things like ABS plastics, because they can be sharp and they can cut you, right? So when you're dealing with those ABS plastics, you just really be careful. Have gloves on, have your eye protection on. If you're smashing a hammer, trying to bust them up, you're going to have pieces flying all over the place. When you're yanking them out, little bits can go popping off. I know that I'm guilty of not wearing my safety goggles as much as I should when I'm breaking down computers. I just ought to have my safety goggles on the whole time. I really should. And I probably just need to adapt this habit, because it's not at all uncommon to pull out the plastic frame of the fan, the cooling fan, and have a little piece of it pop off and go flying out somewhere. So watch out for the sharp edges. Watch out for the pieces that are popping off, flying around. Gloves, safety protection. And we say this all the time, but do not burn your plastics in your own backyard, your fire pit, at your business. You are putting carcinogens in the air. If you can smell it when you're burning it, then you're taking that nasty into your body. And even if you say, oh, well, then I'll stand upwind. Well, all that stuff is blowing somewhere. So you're blowing all those pollutants and carcinogens and other nasty somewhere in the environment that it's going to affect something. So do not burn your plastics. Don't burn your wire. I've had some people who have left comments in some of my videos where they've, gone off on a rant saying, well, what do you think big industry does? It's like, well, there's a huge difference between a large recycling firm that is, dealing with the plastics. If they're burning the plastics off of the wire, they have scrubbers and reclaimers on their stacks. So they're filtering that air before it gets out into the environment. A lot of them aren't burning it. They're stripping it mechanically to get at the copper. So bottom line, do not burn copper wire, period. End of story. A lot of places will not take it anyway, even if you do. Or if they will take it, they require documentation or some sort of certificate from you saying that it came from a fire. Now, as a secondary metal recycler, I'm allowed to deal with burned copper, but I'm responsible for understanding the source, where I got it from. Not uncommon for me to get burnt copper from my electrician clients because, you have a lightning strike, you have a house fire, you have a building fire, and they're replacing the cabling that was damaged. And so now they've got technically burnt wire that has to be dealt with. So don't do it. So that's that safety caution there, is just be careful with your plastics. Don't let them cut you. Don't let them hit you, and don't burn them, because when you start taking them in, that stuff's bad for you. You also want to be careful when you've got your grinder going, because the dust from plastics is not exactly something you want to be inhaling either. So you want to make sure that you have a dust mask on as well. Excuse me, a little coffee break here. So let's see. Bush Dog saying here in Edmonton, the big cement plant, Inland Cement uses old tires to burn for fuel. Yep. Okay. And Bruce is saying there are places that grind the plastics and mix them in with road asphalt. Oh, okay. Very cool. That's an interesting use. Bush Dog says, every time I get something in my eye, my safety glasses are on top of my head. I hear you, man. I hear you. You know, because there's no one to blame but yourself when those kind of things go on. There should be laws that before a company gets paid for its product, the company must invent, save, discard. You know what, Daniel? There actually are laws in some countries, and they're being proposed in others that put the burden and the responsibility on the manufacturer to deal with that product. Now, here's part of the challenge with those. You know, one of the reasons why it's very hard in Canada for people to sell computer scrap, e-scrap, is because they have laws that make it the responsibility of the manufacturer. And so that's why they set up, you know, recovery places where the stuff is supposed to be picked up, and where where a recycling company gets paid by, you know, to recover that stuff and send it on to another place, because the companies that manufactured it are technically responsible for making sure that it's going to get recycled. In some countries, that's a very rigid program, making it very hard for those of us that are small-time scrappers, what are frequently called peddlers, you know, the home scrapper, the hobby scrapper, or even small businesses like me, to do what we do, because, you know, we would have to go through an amazing overhead and certification process to become part of what the government will let us do. So there are laws in some places, and they're being looked at in a lot of other places to do exactly what you're saying. And there's goods and bads associated with that, depending upon how it's handled. But that is one approach that's being looked at. Roger's saying that ABS and PVC puts off cyanide gas. Yeah, that's, you got to watch out for that. That stuff's nasty. Absolutely. Scorpion Metals, got to have a proper vent system for anything that you're using a laser on. A laser. You know what? I'm going to have to look into that, because I've got lasers on some sharks. So, well, I've got lasers on some sharks. So I'm going to need to look into that. Make sure I'm okay with that. Oh man. Boy, we really got off on a weird one there, didn't we? You know, I really think that there's some interesting possibilities in plastics. I'm going to be looking at plastics a lot more when I make my move here in 2024, as well as glass. So we're going to see where that leads us. The business note, our next subject, the business note. I have two things that I want to talk about. One is the first one is there's a new scam that's going on out there in the world. I say it's new. I mean, it's not brand new, but it's new enough that there are folks that may not realize this is happening. So it's called smishing, smishing, smishing. It's a merger of SMS and phishing. And what happens is you get a text on your phone, right? So you'll get this text on your phone, and it'll say something like, this is UPS. We have a package, but there was no street address list or no street number listed. Click here to confirm your address. And then when you click there, you'll be asked to pay a small redelivery fee. Now, what you do then, if you follow this and you go ahead and give them your credit card information, you have now given your credit card information to the bad guys. And then, they'll max out your credit card or do whatever they're going to do. In some cases, they don't even max out your credit card because they don't want to alert you to the scheme. And so, they'll just charge some small fee, but they'll charge that small fee to a few thousand people and get away with it. So in other cases, they might be pretending to be a bank. And they'll say something like, we have a bank transfer for you, but we need to confirm your account number. And because, now this is the psychological thing that these bad guys have done. They've sent it to you on your phone. We have become very trained. That's exactly what's happened. We've been trained to think, oh, it's on my phone. It's a text. It's important. I need to take care of it right away. We get the beep or we get the burp. I mean, to the point where some people are even stupid enough to look at their phones while they're driving and text while they're driving, which is more dangerous than driving under the influence of alcohol. And so what happens is people respond to this text and they say, oh, yeah, here's my street number. Oh, yeah, delivery fee. Yeah, there's my credit card information. Now they have stolen your account information and they're going to take money from you. Or they might try to steal your identity. And so there's little nuances like that. So be very careful to this. It's especially dangerous for small businesses because, we get, I know that in my own world, I'm much more careful about my personal finances and things than I am with the business finances and things, only because, I'm not going to go give my, some of my information to just anybody, my personal stuff. But with my business stuff, well, it's my business. I mean, I'm giving that information to a lot of people for me to do business. And imagine now if you're a larger company, 100, 1,000 employees, and 10 of them have company credit cards, and they get this smishing attack, and they give out, information on their company card. So really need to pay attention to that. Be very careful. I would treat those things the same way I treat even the email schemes that come in. It's like, if I get something that says they're from one of my banks, well, I don't click on the link. I don't follow that email. I will go off, I'll go to the bank directly, log in, through another tab, through the process that I know is my proper way to log in. And I will check and say, look and see, hey, did you really not get this? And then usually you can identify that it was a scheme, and you can then send the information to the bank so that they can try to track down the bad guys. Very rarely do the bad guys ever get caught, but you need to be careful. So when you get these things on your text, a text on your phone that says you need to provide this information right away, just take a step back. And don't do that. Also, a lot of times you'll notice that the text went to 20 people, 100 people all at the same time. Well, that's a scam right there, right? That's not going to happen. So really, really, really important that you pay attention to those kind of things. And then the last part of our our business note for the day. This is the one that how I always try to relate a lot of these things to actual events that occurred during the week. So I had a package that was being delivered, and the delivery company said it was signature required. There was nobody here to sign for it. I could go pick it up at this one location. I'm not going to say what the company is, the delivery company. It doesn't matter. I went down to that location the next day, and they said, oh, no, it's not here yet. It can take 1 to 3 business days before it gets here. We'll let you know when it gets here. And I started getting kind of upset. And I'm like, look, I got a lot going on. I've been standing in line now for 15 minutes because it's the Christmas holidays. Why didn't they tell me this? And And then I stopped. I realized this poor young lady on the other side of the counter is just trying to do her job. It's not her fault. The system that her company set up was not doing her any favors or me. And so I caught my breath and I said, you know what? This is not your fault. I apologize. I will come back in a couple of days. So respect. Show some respect to the people that you're dealing with, that you're doing business with. Take a deep breath sometimes when things aren't going your way or you're upset about something. And remember that chances are the person that you're dealing with, it's not their fault either. They're just trying to do their job. And if we all just take a deep breath, relax a little bit, show each other a little respect, especially during the holiday season when folks can be so busy and, stressed out, it can go a long way to improving your overall relationship. And this is true in business in a lot of ways. Whenever we can be respectful to each other in doing business, we can make a lot more progress than if we're just being nasty with each other, or if we're trying to one up each other, or if we're just trying to, get in an argument with the other person. That's not going to get you anywhere. We're all trying to keep moving forward in this world. And the best way for all of us to keep moving forward in this world is to respect each other and to work with each other towards our mutual success. All right, so that's my business note for the day. Let's get on to the stock market. We've got two L companies to talk about here. The first one, I think just about everybody knows this company, especially if you're, over here in this part of the world. Lowe's company, ticker LO, and their yield right now is 2.1%. This is as of the 15th of December, but holy bajoli, look at this. The share price is $207. Oh my God, I can't afford that. I don't know about you all, but man, I can't afford that. Now, they are a Div Zero. So look at this, 17 years of increasing dividends. Actually, it's been longer than that. So they are qualified from that respect, right? But holy cow, almost $208 a share. Yeah, not going to happen. Plus, they're only offering 2%. So, I can get better returns just from a bank CD than I can. Now, of course, there's a lot of reasons why you buy into a stock. Dividends aren't the only reason you buy a stock. You buy a stock because, a lot of people will buy stocks in anticipation that this price is going to go up at some point in the future and they'll make a lot of money when they sell them. But that's not why I buy stocks. I'm a dividend investor, so I'm always looking at the dividends. Technically qualified, but not one that I'm going to get into. Now, this next company, really kind of interesting here. Leggett and Platt. So Leggett and Platt, this is a really interesting company. They manufacture engineered products, including bedding components, residential and office institutional furniture, store fixtures, displays, die castings, custom tooling, machining, drawn wire, welded steel, tubing, and specialty wire products, automobile suspensions, lumbar support, and control cable systems. I'll bet you that Leggett & Platt is the source of a lot of that ubiquitous wire shelving that I pick up every week. I should probably get stock in Leggett & Platt just because of all the UWS that I pick up all the time when I'm out street strapping. I think they're really interesting because they are technically in the furniture and home furnishings industry, but they're using a lot of recyclable materials, mostly metals, in the stuff that they're making. Now, look at that yield, 7.6%. And that's only on $24.25 a share. So that's a very reasonable price. I think most of us could afford to buy into this stock, and to get over 7% dividend return. That's pretty sweet. They are qualified here. Look at that, 17 years of increasing dividends per share every year. Here, look at this. Look at that return. You know, that is a real nice slope on the dividends. They've had some, earnings and cash flow challenges. You can see that they were doing really well. And then, you got COVID come in and that hits them. They've done some restructuring and stuff. Let's see, what is the investment line survey analysis here? They recorded some lackluster third quarter results. The revenues fell by 9% year over year, around $1.2 billion. I would like to have revenues of $1.2 billion. Youch. Let's see. So they had to do some adjustments. They're working on some reorganizations. They expect operations to improve in the years ahead. The revenues will likely rebound as Leggett ought to gain from higher levels of demand from end users for its components. All right. This is going to include the increased sales of inner springs and some of the other furniture products. So overall, they are ranked below average for timeliness. So they have reduced the long-term target price. So they're saying that out in the long term, they're looking at getting between $45 and $65 a share. And where are they right now? 20 something a share. All right. So there's going to be, that would be nice if it gets to that point, 4 or 5 years out. The stock holds plenty of recovery potential and the dividend payout has some appeal. However, only risk tolerant accounts should look here. So, what they're saying here is you've got, you can see the challenges even when they were overall rising. They had some ups and downs along the way, and they have lately had some challenges. And look, right now, their earnings per share are below their dividends per share. So when you see that kind of, you got to be careful here, because if they can't generate earnings per share above the dividend rate, then there's the risk that they would lower the dividend rate. Now, they have historically not done that. You can see they were in the same situation back here. They have historically continued to raise their dividends every year. So they're trying to be investor friendly. And that's why the folks at Value Line are saying you have to be risk tolerant. You're going to have a strong stomach to sit out all these ups and downs as this is going along. But yeah, as recyclers, we recycle a lot of the products that this company makes, the bed frames, the steel furniture, the ubiquitous wire shelving. So, there's a tie-in there for us that we ought to, we should be thinking about. I want to remind everybody that I use the Value Line Investment Survey for the bulk of my analysis on stocks that I look at. These folks do not take any advertising dollars, so it is all just straight data and analysis of that data. And then I can take what I learned from the Value Line Investment Survey, go look at other sources to confirm things before I put the information out for all of you. But it's a real nice source of real data and information and independent, unbiased analysis of that data and information. So it's very valuable for me as I try to understand the stocks that I'm going to invest in, which is the other important aspect here. I am not a financial counselor. I'm not certified, licensed, or in any way legally allowed to provide you any kind of financial advice or recommendations. I'm simply sharing with you what I do when I look at the companies that I'm going to invest in or not invest in, and letting you have that information so that you can be better informed to make your decisions as well. If you are going to invest in anything, please make sure that you do your due diligence, and if necessary and if possible, talk with people who are licensed or certified financial counselors or investment providers, because you can lose all of your money when you buy stocks. And if you try to play the futures games, you can even lose more than your own money, when you start doing that kind of stuff. So please be very careful before you invest in any stocks. If you have autoplay enabled, when I end this stream here in just a minute or two, you will be automatically redirected to Scrapping Irish on the other side of the pond, who is with us. He's got his internet problems figured out. I am looking forward to heading across the pond to Ireland, having a lot of fun with Scrapping Irish. You never know who's going to pop up on his panel. You never know where the questions are going to take us. It's always a lot of fun in Ireland when we wrap up here. And that redirect will happen automatically if you have autoplay enabled. If you do not have autoplay enabled, then please go to YouTube, enter in a search for Scrapping Irish, click on the link that'll take you to his live stream, because it'll be fun to hang out over there for a while longer. The conversation can be quite a bit free-flowing. All right, everybody, I look forward to seeing you on the other side of the pond. Have a safe and wonderful week. If you celebrate the Christmas holidays, have an awesome Christmas. I am not going to be live next week on Sunday. Mrs. Shark has obligated us to some events, so I will not be able to come up live next week on Sunday, Christmas Eve. So have a wonderful Christmas. We'll see you in 2 weeks. And off we are to the other side of the pond. Bye-bye, everybody.